Well, Minister, I have to say you've really surpassed yourselves. You've really surpassed yourselves today. I was speaking to somebody last week in the education sphere, and our conversation turns to teacher shortage, and this person said to me, well, whatever the government come up with, you can be quite sure that their plan will put the blame on teachers. And sure enough, as if by magic, just as you're scrambling around to try and find answers in order to come up with some sort of a response to the excellent motion put down by my colleague Gary Gannon and the Social Democrats, you've done it again. And it reminds me actually of the time during the pandemic when the schools were closed because that was the medical advice, and there was controversy over how we could reopen schools. And despite the fact that government wasn't listening to school leaders, government wasn't prioritising air filtration systems in schools, wasn't investing in schools, wasn't providing supports for teachers. At the end of the day, when it came down to it, what you wanted parents and WhatsApp groups and the conversation at dinner tables to be about how this wasn't really about government inaction, it wasn't about failures of government, it wasn't even about the virus, it was actually about teachers. And then when it came to the spectacular failure of government to actually find school places last September for children with additional needs, despite the fact that you had to ram through emergency legislation at the end of June, despite the fact it was actually about government inaction in that space, what you also managed to do as a government was to blame individual schools and teachers and principals in that schools, and one of your ministers named 4 schools. Again, what you're hoping in the WhatsApp groups and at the school gates and at dinner tables was that it won't be about government inaction. It's actually about these teachers and these principals. And in fact, it's about those 4 individual schools that were named by the minister. Again, it's the teacher's fault. And then today, in a spectacular fashion, when every teacher and every principal and every SNA you speak to refers to the housing crisis when it comes to the teacher supply problem, your minister comes in and reads out a 15-page speech, 1 page of which is about housing. And then you manage, through leakage from your cabinet discussions, to put the blame on those pesky teachers and their career breaks. So, once again, the teacher supply problem isn't about government inaction or about housing, it's actually about teachers again. So what you want to have in all these debates about school reopening during COVID, kind of the teacher's fault, about lack of places for children with additional needs, again it's the teacher's fault, and now the fact that we can't get teachers is actually the teacher's fault. Absolutely unbelievable. And Minister, I will tell you flatly and plainly, the only reason why the education system hasn't completely and utterly collapsed is because of the goodwill and the professionalism of those teachers that you seem determined to malign. The teachers, the SNAs and the wider school community. So let's talk plainly about what the actual problem is. It's a housing problem. And I don't want to have a debate here which pits rural against urban Ireland. But let's be frank here. You're allowing Dublin to die on your watch. We cannot get teachers, nurses, guards to live in the capital city and to serve the capital city. Our schools are being bled of talent that could potentially teach these children. And the children feel it, they know it, because it's the children who are in classrooms without a teacher, or with a substitute teacher, or they have a succession of teachers. And they know that there's something wrong. And by the way, oftentimes these teachers, if they do happen to have a chance to teach, are actually teaching children who are also affected by the homelessness crisis and the housing crisis, living with their parents in their grandparents' house. I know of a particular school, which I have a personal relationship with, who told me that the situation has completely changed over the last 12 years, that 24% of the children are now in homelessness. And yet, you have a chance to respond to today's motion, and what do? You want those of us in opposition who are talking about teacher supply to actually have to talk about career breaks, not about housing. It is absolutely unbelievable that you've constructed a narrative today that we're talking about career breaks for teachers and not about housing. So I feel that the city I love, the city I grew up in, the city I live in, the city I care about, is now dying on your watch. Because we can't fundamentally get nurses who say they can't live in Dublin. The Taoiseach seems to think that what the guards need is a gun rather than a gaff. And teachers are being priced out of this city. So, Minister, I say it plainly to you. We need to talk seriously about a Dublin allowance. And I know this is going to get people in the rural independents very excited when a TD stands up and says that. But fair enough. Because we have it in London. Because when they had a teacher shortage issue in London, they recognised that the cost of living issue in London was serious, that they needed teachers to teach London kids, and it was that important because of the particular pressures in London. So let's talk seriously about it here in Dublin as well. Let's talk seriously about providing a standard of living for teachers in Dublin, that it shouldn't be an aspiration that you could be a teacher to live and to work in Dublin. That shouldn't be outside of the capacity of a teacher. And that the state recognises that and introduces a Dublin allowance. That is a much more constructive idea for you to toss around the place rather than having an onslaught once again on teachers' pay and conditions. Because I swear to God, Minister, if any of you in government, in cabinet or in the backbenches spent 5 minutes in a school classroom, you wouldn't be able to survive because of the number of skills and competencies that you would need. So back off from the teachers, back off from their terms and conditions, and realising that what you are doing is overseeing a housing crisis that is pushing teachers out of Dublin and affecting the children of Dublin, and it's not good enough, and you need to sort it.